The history of the ancient world as we know it is a lie. Not a deliberate lie, but a lie of omission. While Rome dominated the West, a forgotten superpower thrived in the heart of Africa. An empire so powerful, an ancient prophet ranked it alongside Rome, Persia, and China as one of the four great powers on the earth. Its engineers erected the single largest stone monument of the ancient world, dwarfing the famous obelisks of Egypt. Its king adopted Christianity at the same time as the Roman Emperor Constantine, making it one of the first Christian nations on earth. And to this day, it is the believed resting place of the legendary Ark of the Covenant. This is the story of a kingdom that challenges everything you thought you knew about history. This is the story of Aksum. Our journey begins not in a palace, but on the land itself, the Horn of Africa. This is the rooftop of a continent, a rugged, dramatic landscape of high plateaus that average over 6,000 feet above sea level. This altitude creates a temperate climate, a world away from the scorching deserts to its north. It's a land of thin air and surprisingly fertile soil, enriched by ancient volcanic activity. For millennia, it was a cradle of human evolution, but by the first millennium BCE, a sophisticated civilization had begun to leave its mark. They were the people of Damt, a kingdom that flourished here centuries before Aksum was even a name. They built impressive temples of stone, worshipped a pantheon of gods linked to the moon and the sun, and developed complex irrigation systems. They were in close contact with the powerful kingdoms of South Arabia across the narrow strait of the Red Sea, particularly the Sabaeans, the very kingdom linked to the legendary Queen of Sheba. Indeed, the foundational myth of Ethiopia, the story of Sheba and King Solomon, breathes the air of this ancient connection, a shared heritage of culture and trade. The people of Damt laid the groundwork. They were the prologue. But around the 4th century BCE, their power began to wane, and out of this precursor civilization, a new power center began to coalesce around a small town in the highlands named Aksum. For centuries, it was just one of many small chiefdoms competing for resources, but it had a key geographical advantage. It was situated in a perfect position to control the trade routes that snaked down from the highlands through treacherous mountain passes to the shimmering coast of the Red Sea. And on that coast, a city was growing that would soon become the engine of an empire, Adulis. To understand Aksum, you must understand Adulis. Imagine standing on its docks in the 2nd century AD. The air is thick with the smell of salt, exotic spices, and the musky scent of frankincense. The cosmopolitan Greek of Roman merchants mixes with the sharp Semitic consonants of the local Ge'ez, the Aramaic of traders from Palmyra, and the Dravidian tongues of sailors from the Indian subcontinent. It was a chaotic, vibrant symphony of global commerce. A 1st century Greek shipping manual, the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, describes it as a major trade hub, a vital artery of the ancient world. From the African interior, a steady stream of caravans brought the treasures that the Roman elite craved: immense elephant tusks for carving into luxury furniture and statues, rhinoceros horn prized for its supposed medicinal properties, and shimmering tortoiseshell, gold dust, slaves, obsidian, and aromatic gums flowed through Adulis's warehouses. In return, Roman ships brought the products of a vast industrial empire: brightly dyed cloth, fine Italian wine in large clay amphorae, tools of iron and copper, and crucially, Roman minted currency that served as the international standard. But Adulis was not merely a passive port of call.
It was the heart of a directed, state-sponsored economic machine. The king of Aksum, residing in his capital high in the mountains, controlled this flow with meticulous care. He held a monopoly on the ivory trade, a resource as valuable as oil is today. He provided security for the trade routes, clearing them of pirates and rival tribes, ensuring the safe passage of goods. This security was a service worth paying for, and the taxes and tariffs levied in Adulis filled the royal coffers to overflowing. The secret to this entire system was a force of nature, the monsoon winds. For half the year, from April to September, the winds blew reliably from the southwest, pushing fleets of ships from Roman Egypt down the Red Sea and across the vast expanse of the Indian Ocean. For the other half, from October to March, they reversed, blowing from the northeast, allowing a safe and speedy return journey. Aksumite sailors were masters of these winds. They were the navigators of this vast oceanic system, their sewn plank ships, known as dhows, a common sight from the shores of Arabia to the coasts of India. Aksum was not a landlocked mountain kingdom. It was a maritime empire, its lifeblood the deep blue waters of the sea. This wealth, a torrent of gold and silver, flowed from the coast up to the capital, and it was there, in Aksum city, that the kings began to spend it. But where did all this wealth go? It didn't just sit in a vault, it built a world. Archaeological excavations reveal a sophisticated, cosmopolitan city. The kingdom was ruled from a massive, multi-storied palace complex known as Taka Mariam, a labyrinth of halls, courtyards, and royal residences, its foundations alone covering an area the size of a modern city block. The elite of Aksum lived in sprawling, stone-built villas, some several stories high, with internal plumbing and grand reception halls. But a city is more than its palaces. The society that supported this grandeur was a complex tapestry of farmers, artisans, soldiers, and priests. The backbone of the empire was the farmer, cultivating the fertile highland soil. They grew wheat and barley, but most importantly, they cultivated a unique native grain called teff, the same grain used today to make Ethiopia's famous injera bread. This reliable food source sustained a large population. In the city's craft districts, artisans produced distinctive pottery with intricate red and black patterns. Needleworkers forged iron tools and weapons, while others worked the bronze and gold that flowed in from the trade routes. It was a stratified yet vibrant society that powered the ambitions of its kings. And the ambitions of Aksumite kings were quite literally set in stone. If a civilization's ambition can be measured, then Aksum's ambition must be measured in stone. The stele field in the heart of Aksum is one of the most astonishing sights in the ancient world. As you walk among them, you are walking in a forest of granite where the trees are monuments to dead kings. These are not crudely shaped pillars. They are intricate architectural marvels. But how, in an age without engines or cranes, did they achieve this? The process began miles away, in a granite quarry where master builders would identify a suitable rock face, free of fractures. Then began the grueling work of hewing it from the earth. They didn't have steel chisels. Instead, they used the ancient, laborious technique of pounding the rock with heavy, handheld balls of dolerite, a stone harder than granite. Thousands of workers, over months, perhaps years, would pulverize the rock, slowly freeing the monolithic block.
Then came the transportation. Imagine the scene. Tens of thousands of men, a human engine, straining in unison to pull the colossal weight on timber rollers. The logistics are mind-boggling.
clearing a path, building ramps, coordinating the movement of a 500-ton stone across miles of uneven terrain. The sound must have been deafening, the chanting of the workers, the crack of whips, the groaning of the timber under a weight that defied belief. Once at the site, the intricate carving began, all done while the stone lay on the ground. These were not just decorations, they were architectural blueprints in stone, meant to represent the eternal homes of the deceased kings, complete with false doors and windows. Finally, the erection. It is a mystery that still sparks debate. It likely involved building a massive earthen ramp, dragging the steel up it, and then tipping it into a deep, pre-dug foundation packed with stabilizing stones. The final, terrifying moments as the monolith was tilted into place must have been a spectacle of immense human drama and engineering genius. Each stele was propaganda in granite. The largest of them all, the Great Stele, stood at 108 feet tall. It was a skyscraper of its day, a defiant challenge to the sky itself, visible from miles around, a declaration to any visiting merchant or foreign diplomat that they were entering the domain of a mighty and sophisticated power. It was built to awe, to intimidate, and to last forever. But Aksum's message to the world wasn't only carved in stone, it was stamped in metal. Beginning with King Endubis around 270 AD, Aksum became the first civilization in sub-Saharan Africa to mint its own coinage. This was a pivotal moment. The minting of coins is a declaration of sovereignty, a projection of power and stability. Aksumite coins in gold, silver, and bronze were produced for over 3 centuries. The gold coins, bearing inscriptions in Greek, the international language of trade, were intended for the global market, precisely matching the weight standard of Roman currency to facilitate exchange. The silver and bronze coins, inscribed in the native Ge'ez script, were for the thriving local economy. And these coins are where we can read the secret history of Aksum's soul. The earliest coins show the king, his head framed by 2 ears of grain, a symbol of prosperity. Above him, a pagan disc and crescent, representing the old gods. But then, we follow the reign of King Ezana in the 4th century.
His first coins follow the old ways, but his later issues are revolutionary. The pagan symbols vanish. In their place, discreetly at first, then emblazoned across the entire coin, is the Christian cross. It is here, on a piece of gold no bigger than a thumbnail, that we witness one of the most important turning points in African history. The story of how it happened is a drama worthy of an epic. Our source is a 4th century historian named Rufinus, who heard the tale from one of the men who lived it. Sometime in the early 300s, a Christian scholar from Tyre named Meropius set sail for India. With him were 2 young boys he was tutoring, Frumentius and Odysseus. On their return journey, their ship docked at an Aksumite port, where a local dispute flared into violence. The entire crew and all passengers were massacred, except for the 2 boys, who were found studying under a tree. Taken as slaves, they were presented to the king of Aksum. He was impressed by their intelligence and education. Instead of a life of hard labor, they were given positions in the royal court. Frumentius, the elder and more brilliant of the 2, eventually became the royal treasurer and secretary. When the old king died, his son, the future king Ezana, was just an infant. The queen regent begged Frumentius to stay and help her administer the kingdom until the boy came of age. For years, Frumentius effectively helped rule Aksum.
A devout Christian, he used his position of power to seek out Roman Christian merchants, granting them privileges and encouraging them to build places of prayer. He planted the seeds of his faith in the very heart of the empire. When King Ezana finally took the throne, the man he trusted most, his childhood tutor and mentor, was Frumentius. It was this deep personal relationship that led Ezana to convert, and with him, his entire kingdom. Frumentius was later sent to Alexandria, the center of Christian theology, where the Patriarch Athanasius consecrated him as the first bishop of Aksum. He returned not as a former slave, but as Abba Salama, the Father of Peace, the head of a new national church.
This was a revolution from the top down. Ezana inscribed his victories on great stone monuments, and like his coins, they tell the story of his conversion. In his early inscriptions, he thanks the pagan god of war. In his later inscriptions, he attributes his victories to the Lord of heaven and earth. The adoption of Christianity was a profound spiritual and cultural shift, but it was also a brilliant act of foreign policy. It instantly allied Aksum with the newly Christianized Roman Empire, creating a powerful Christian axis that stretched from Britain to Ethiopia, united against their common rival, the Zoroastrian Persian Empire. The new faith spurred a burst of intellectual activity. The Bible was translated into the local Ge'ez script, a monumental task that required the development of a complex theological vocabulary. But Ge'ez itself was a unique Aksumite achievement. Derived from older South Arabian scripts, Aksumite scribes innovated it by adding mandatory vowel markings to each consonant, creating one of the world's oldest and most sophisticated alpha syllabaries. This unique script became the vehicle for a rich literary tradition of theology, history, and poetry that would preserve the kingdom's identity for centuries to come. But Ezana's revolution was not just one of faith and letters. It was one of fire and steel. To the north of Aksum lay its ancient and now declining rival, the Kingdom of Kush, with its capital at Meroe. For centuries, this was the great power of the Nile, the land of the Black Pharaohs. But its time was passing. Ezana, leading his newly unified and zealous kingdom, marched north. On a great stone inscription, he details his campaign with chilling clarity, describing the destruction of Kushite towns and the final submission of their king. With the fall of Meroe, Aksum eliminated its last regional rival, cementing its status as the undisputed superpower of Northeast Africa. Most enduringly, Aksum became the custodian of a belief that continues to define Ethiopian identity to this day. The belief that it is the final resting place of the Ark of the Covenant. This foundational story, recorded in the medieval epic the Kebra Nagast, or the Glory of Kings, tells how the Queen of Sheba visited King Solomon, and from their union a son, Menelik, was born.
When Menelik grew up, he traveled to Jerusalem to meet his father, and upon his return, he brought the Ark of the Covenant with him to Ethiopia, with God's blessing. Was this a true story, or did it represent a deeper truth? For the Aksumites, and for Ethiopians ever since, the story is history. It makes their land the new Zion, the true inheritor of the Israelite tradition, a chosen nation. This belief, this sacred conviction, transformed Aksum from a political capital into the holiest of cities, a fortress of faith. For 2 more centuries, this faith, combined with its economic might, allowed Aksum to thrive. In the 6th century, its power reached its zenith under King Caleb. The geopolitical chessboard was dominated by the two superpowers, Christian Byzantium, the Eastern Roman Empire, and Zoroastrian Persia. Arabia was the key battleground. In the southern Arabian kingdom of Himyar, in modern Yemen, a usurper king, backed by the Persians, began a brutal persecution of the Christian population, culminating in a horrific massacre at the city of Najran. The Byzantine Emperor Justin called upon his powerful Christian ally to intervene. King Caleb, seeing both a moral duty and a strategic opportunity to strike at his Persian rivals, assembled a massive fleet. The Aksumite army crossed the Red Sea, crushed the usurper, and installed a Christian ruler in Yemen, turning it into a vassal state. It was a stunning projection of power, the last great flexing of Aksum's international might. But even at this zenith, the seeds of its decline were being sown. The wars in Yemen were incredibly costly in both blood and treasure, and a greater rival than the Persians was looming, one that would change the world forever. The 7th and 8th centuries witnessed the meteoric rise of Islam. The Arab conquests shattered the old world order. The Sasanians in Persia were conquered. Roman Byzantium lost Egypt, Syria, and all of North Africa. For Aksum, the consequence was suffocation. The Red Sea, once its highway to the world, became a barrier. The new Islamic caliphates controlled the coasts and the sea lanes. Aksum's trade, its lifeblood, was severed.
The kingdom was now profoundly isolated, a Christian bastion surrounded by a new and dynamic Islamic civilization. Its political and economic ties to Byzantium and the Mediterranean were gone. This isolation was compounded by a series of environmental catastrophes. Scientific evidence from lakebed sediments and ice cores suggests that this period saw intense, prolonged droughts. The late antique Little Ice Age, likely caused by a series of massive volcanic eruptions in the 6th century, disrupted weather patterns globally. For Aksum, centuries of intensive farming had already led to deforestation and soil erosion. The changing climate was the final blow. Famine gripped the land. The fertile highlands that supported its large population began to fail. The empire was forced to contract. The coastal cities like Adulis were abandoned, left to be buried by the sand. The capital itself became less important as the population shifted south into more defensible, rain-fed agricultural lands. It was a slow, agonizing retreat from the world stage, a transition from a cosmopolitan, mercantile empire to an inward-looking, agrarian, feudal society. The final violent end of the Aksumite era is remembered in Ethiopian legend through the terrifying figure of Queen Gudit. A shadowy figure described as a Jewish queen or a pagan or a usurper from the south, she is said to have led a rebellion in the mid-10th century. Her armies, the legends say, laid waste to the land, burned the ancient churches and monasteries to the ground, and slaughtered the royal family. While archaeologists have found evidence of widespread destruction from this period, the true identity of Gudit remains one of Aksum's greatest unsolved mysteries. But what she represents is clear: a period of violent chaos that shattered the last vestiges of the old empire.
Aksum was broken. The thread of its ancient dynasty was torn. But the story did not end there. In the ensuing chaos, the legacy of Aksum was carried like a seed into the high mountain fortresses and remote monasteries. Here, scribes protected the ancient texts, and the priests kept the faith alive. This period of darkness, this interregnum,
eventually gave way to a new power, the Zagwe dynasty. Though not of the original Solomonic line, the Zagwe kings saw themselves as the spiritual heirs of Aksum. They embraced its Christian traditions, and in a burst of renewed faith, created one of the wonders of the medieval world, the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela, a new Jerusalem carved from the living stone of the mountains. The legacy had survived. And so it was forgotten. Forgotten by a world whose maps were being redrawn. The new Islamic empires wrote the history of the region, and Christian Aksum, now isolated and inland, was no longer a major character in their story. Forgotten by European chroniclers who, entering the Dark Ages, lost contact and eventually saw the lands of Ethiopia as a mythical realm of fantasy. Its legacy, however, did not die. It went dormant, transforming itself in the crucible of the mountains. A new dynasty, the Zagwe, rose from the ashes, and later another dynasty would claim direct lineage from the last Aksumite kings, creating the Solomonic line that would rule Ethiopia until 1974. The faith that Ezna adopted became the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, a spiritual institution that would preserve the Ge'ez script, the stories, and the identity of the Aksumite past for over 1,000 years. The ruins of Aksum were never truly lost to the people who lived there. They were a constant, silent reminder of a glorious past. But to the wider world, they became a whisper, a ghost of history. Today, as we piece together the evidence, the coins found in distant lands, the inscriptions on weathered stone, the accounts of foreign merchants, the ghost begins to take form. It is the form of a giant, an African power that stood shoulder to shoulder with the greatest empires of its time. The story of Aksum forces us to redraw our mental map of the ancient world. It compels us to acknowledge that the stage of history was wider, more complex, and more diverse than we ever imagined. The dragons on the edge of the map are not monsters to be feared. They are forgotten civilizations waiting for their stories to be told. The story of Aksum is not a footnote. It is a vital chapter in the history of our shared world, and it is a chapter we are only now, finally, beginning to read.